Afrobeats to the world has like served us. Like we've earned money. Our artists are able to more than take care of themselves. My concern is what happens once the applause is kind of done. And it may not be, it won't come to like a screeching halt, but we're kind of seeing we're in a valley this year. You can think about how many albums have dropped this year, EPs, singles, and how many of them have stuck. And then we're also in a bit of a cultural identity crisis because we've adopted so much in terms of our sound that we almost don't even recognize our own sound.
What's up, everybody? It's Ngazi, and I'm back with another episode of AFRO Archives. For today's guest, I'll be speaking with Nneka Mogbo, a talent manager and creative strategist. We spoke about her journey of pursuing the music industry while living in the Middle East, moving to Lagos and becoming music journalist Joey Akan's manager, and founding Úrú Collective. We also touched on hot topics such as Africa to the world, and also about the lack of music infrastructure in Nigeria. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's get into today's episode. Thank you so much, Nneka, for joining me on Afro Archives Podcast. I really appreciate you taking this time to speak with me today.
Of course, of
Yeah,
course. Thank you so much for having me and for reaching out.
yeah, of course. Because I knew like the first time that we had our first chat, I was just thinking, I was like, I have to have her on my podcast because you dropped so much knowledge just in like 30 minutes. So I was just thinking, let me pick her brain a little bit more. Like I want to just learn more about her and everything. And then on my podcast, the first question I typically like to ask is, what are three songs from the past that define your journey of becoming a music enthusiast? And if that's too hard, three artists.
Ah, three songs. Um, okay, so I think three artists would probably be easier for me.
Okay, yeah.
So I think the first artist for me is Chief Osita,
Okay.
Osadebe. So like I that was, Igbo high life. Growing up, that's what my mom played alongside of Igbo gospel music. And I was always like, just stunned by like the level of calm that I felt and connectedness that I felt like with his music. Because of course, like it reminded me of my mom, and of course, by extension, like the larger part of my family. And then the second artist that comes to mind is Kulthum. She's a classical Egyptian singer. And I started listening to her like in high school and had no idea what she was saying, but like it inspired the love that I have for the Arabic language, which I went on to like later study. And yeah, just with her music, like with her Osadebe. And then my third artist, ooh, who would I say? My third artist is Taiki, who's a Afro love, genre artist, as he likes to call himself, but essentially French pop and like the francophone extension of Afrobeats. And so the combination of those three have like been a through line in a lot of the work that I do because of the linguistic and cultural connections that I have to them.
Yeah, I love that. That's honestly such a versatile list. I love Takey too. I love his
Uh-huh.
music so much. I hope he can go on tour in the US. I think did he already go on tour before? Or
He did.
he
In
did?
2023 or 2022, I saw him in Georgia,
Um,
actually. He performed a little outside of Atlanta, but yeah, he performed. And of lately, he's kind of been, well, explicitly saying, but also sort of like hinting that this year is kind of like his last year in music. He
oh,
did
really?
lose his friend. I think it's also a cousin, but essentially like a brother to him. And so I think that really rocked him. And so yeah, that's his journey
Well,
right now.
honestly, I didn't even know about that update. That's really sad.
Hmm.
He's so talented, but I mean, grief is very hard. So, yeah,
Hmm.
prayers for him.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
you know, Yeah, and transitioning into your love for music or getting deeper into your love for music, you're someone who's like worn a lot of hats in such a short period of time, like content strategist, talent manager, founder, you know what I mean? But
Uh-huh.
what led you initially to pursue music management? Because I know
Hmm.
in Algeria, you completed your master's with a focus in music industry, and
Hmm.
also you were into songwriting. So I'm just interested to learn more about that.
So yeah, so I hit a bunch of yeah, I hit a bunch of roles like in a short period because I was trying to get in to the music industry, if that makes sense. Like I was trying to find my official role or space within the music industry. And so it started off initially, I was in college, like I did a couple of study abroad programs and work abroad. And I'd always like involved music in some capacity, whether it was like a research project or, anything I was doing. And it wasn't until like my final year that it dawned on me that, oh, this is like a full industry that like, you could find your way through. But of course, like it was in the middle of the pandemic, essentially, like, or at the beginnings of the pandemic. So things started shutting down fairly quickly. And so, while I was, working in cultural programming, I was working for like a legal office at the same time. I was still trying to find my way through the music industry, and that led me to a mentorship program, which transferred me into an internship program called Power to Inspire. And so I was in the music exec lane, which is basic. I knew I wasn't going to be a musician, and I was sure that I didn't want to do songwriting forever.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so I was in that lane. They paired me with an agency that's run by actually two Americans in South Africa called Africa Creative Agency. And shout out to Colin and Yvette Gale because seeing the way that they ran their agency, just from what I could see, at least with it being a virtual internship, it really taught me that number one, it's possible and that you can see connections in different cultures within music and, go on to pursue, commercializing and making sure that those, bridges and cultures are heard. And so, because their agency is responsible for like Nasty C, Tiwa, the rest of them. And so I really enjoyed working with them. And at the same time, because the reason why I touched so many roles is because there were so many things going on at the time. I had been selected for Fulbright, but of course the pandemic, and so they delayed it by 2 years. So by 2022, the State Department was like, "Hey, do you still want to do this program?" And I was like, "Sure." So I went into it, and at the same time, I was also doing event planning and meeting planning. So I was like selecting, guests, speakers, etc. And so when it was time for me to go to Algeria, I was, still doing three things. I was in music. I was, starting off Úrú, and then I was also, still doing the event planning, cultural programming, and then I was basically being shipped off to Algeria. And then also doing my master's at the same time. When I say it out loud, I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a
I'm
lot.
like, I don't know how you did that. 'Cause I was even gonna ask, how did you go about balancing working in a legal office and, pursuing your passion? Because that's a sacrifice.
Yeah, at the time, I thought that I would chase music until I got bored, that it would essentially be like this professional hobby for me, and that eventually I would somehow find a way to balance the two or like essentially go back fully into law, meaning I would take the LSAT and go on to law school after working with a legal aid service. But because I had volunteered and worked with them even before graduating. And so working full time, it was different. And it was different because you were dealing with people who were in dire legal situations that were compounded by the fact that we were in the pandemic. So it took a really, and still to this day, like it took a really hard toll on my mental health. And it made me question, whether or not this was something I wanted to do long term even, right? And so yeah, so in the midst of that, like I left legal aid. So at that point, that's when it transitioned me into doing like working with a company where I was doing cultural programming and their meeting planning and booking guests.
Yeah. Oh, that's a real transition of things. But I just think it's a testimony of how you've persevered, especially the pandemic. That was not an easy time at all
Yeah.
for anyone. And then to
No.
be making that transition, in that time. I really commend that, honestly.
Thank you.
And getting back into, Algeria, you living there for a bit. So take me back to that transition of growing up in Atlanta to working in Algeria and Tunisia, and then to now being in Lagos.
So growing up in Atlanta, there's a large Nigerian American community. And then specifically, there's an Igbo church that we grew up in, that my mom and her friends and my uncles and aunts created, right? And so that church, essentially built because we did our services in Igbo, and so you're getting this cultural understanding of who you are on that linguistic and cultural like level, and at the same time like it's connecting to your spirituality. And so, yeah, growing up in Atlanta, it looks like, church on Sundays, you're doing your prayers in Igbo. Our mom was very keen on signing us up for like dance troops and, just different ways for us to understand ourselves. I grew up with three siblings, so, that's who I'm referring to by ourselves. Um, so yeah, so I left Atlanta and went off to college in South Carolina. And initially I was like, I want to be in DC because at the time, like I was like, I'm going to go into foreign diplomacy and that's going to be like life for me. So, I went off to school in South Carolina, specifically Wofford. And I picked Wofford because one, I would be able to study French and I would be able to study Arabic. Because I was leaving high school, I was in love with Egyptian classical music, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to like learn this language. And so yeah, went to school in South Carolina, graduated, lived there for a little bit, post grad, and then heading off to Algeria. It was a bittersweet moment because it was, I was able to go on to do my Fulbright program, but at the same time, I was questioning if, you know, this life that I've started to build, this young adult life, like post grad, if it was really worth like leaving in the at what felt like at the beginning of leaving and just going off to do this program. But ultimately, I felt intrinsically I had to do it, and so went off to Algeria. I was an English teaching assistant, and at the same time, like I was connecting with the music community there, and I was also, preparing to head off to like Lagos right after. Because once I was leaving the US, like I even had initially put my stuff in storage and I was gonna leave my car with my mom. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take this break and go do this thing and like come back. But deep inside, I knew that I wasn't going to come back. And so, like, last minute, I sold everything off, and went off to Algeria, and then once I was done with the program, I headed to Lagos.
Would you consider yourself a risk taker? Because I feel like what I've been hearing, you're someone that really just goes for it.
I don't know if I would say I'm a risk taker. Yeah, I guess so. I take calculated risk.
Okay. That's very real. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause I remember seeing a post on your Instagram, you were talking about doing it scared, and that's
Mm,
just so real because on the other side of that, it's fruitful. So I think as creatives, it's something to push ourselves to do.
mhm.
Even me doing this podcast, I'm doing it scared,
Yeah. You
not
have
knowing the
to.
outcome. Yeah, you literally have to. So, how would you say living in, the different countries has shaped how you navigate being in management and content development?
Um, it makes me think about what would someone in Algeria, someone in Tanzania, someone in Nigeria, like what would they care about, right? Um, because the work I did or initially was rooted in like diplomacy, there's a lot of thinking outside of yourself, thinking about strategically like what matters to the next person and how you can deliver it. And so I was really surprised like when that transferred over to content as well because we're a pretty global society, right? The person in Australia can access the same YouTube videos more than likely that I can, right? With few exceptions. And so, having experience in different markets, it's made me like with the clients that I work with, I don't think locally, right? Of course, like I'm thinking about, okay, how does this connect to the people who've been listening to you in Nigeria or, your home market, right? But my mind is always thinking, but where else can you reach? Who else can you connect to? Because there's always opportunities on the other side, right? Whether it's financial, whether it's audience growth, there's always opportunities in, being visible in other markets. And so I would say that diplomacy, kind of background, that background of like international affairs, like definitely contributed to, I guess the narrow pathways or the strategic thinking in terms of who is this supposed to reach? Who do you want to reach and why? Like what really matters to them.
Yeah. And I can tell like you're really in touch with so many different cultures and you really appreciate different cultures. And on Instagram, you describe yourself as the cultural nexus. So can you break down for me about like what that means to you and why you rock that title?
Yeah, so it's funny because one of my mentors in the past, like uh, described me as that, and I just held on to it. And for me, what it means is like becoming the intersection for culture, becoming the intersection for where people are trying to go and making sure that you point them in the direction of how to get there. So whether again that's commercial or that's just through understanding. I work with brands who are maybe they're not trying to traverse markets, but maybe for example they're a drink brand and they've done well. In terms of sales, but they're not really rooted in the culture or in the people. And so, it then becomes a conversation of firstly, like, what part of the culture do you want to be involved in? And what do you want to give in exchange for them, purchasing your products? And so yeah, cultural nexus for me is the meeting point of where who are you trying to reach essentially? And that's translated to clients who we manage like their personal brands, down to commercial brands, drink brands, clothing, etc.
Oh, that's really cool. I love how it started as someone giving you that title and you just taking it and running with it. It's really cool. And then transitioning into talking about your management side. So, can you tell me the story about how you first met Joey Akan and how you became his manager? Did you pitch to him or was it just an organic thing?
So I laugh about this because this was about 3-4 months or so after uh arriving in Nigeria. I'd signed up for the Music Business in Africa program or MBA for Africa. No, Music Business Academy for Africa. And it's headed by Godwin Tom, but essentially it's a yearly cohort of people that they're training through the music industry locally, some of the basics and all of that stuff. So going into the program, they had a mixer for us. And I met Joey at the mixer. And, at the time, like I didn't know who he was. Like, I'm not even trying to cap. Like I didn't know who he was. He was like, I'm a journalist, and he's like showing me his articles and like, I did this and like this and this and this. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, and oh, I have a podcast, not knowing that the podcast like you had already grown and gotten so much traction. So I'm just like, oh, like look at this, journalist who enjoys writing and has a podcast. How cute is the word that
Not cute.
I
Cute is crazy.
so we met, and at the time, Úrú was actually Úrú Music Collective. So I was working with some artists. I was managing them. I was, just trying to feel my way out through the market. And so it wasn't until like a year into knowing each other that I was like, okay, actually, what you're doing, like, it's cool. Of course, at that time, like, I had more context, right? But initially, it started off as like, "Oh, this person hasn't paid me, like, I don't know what to do," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll just pretend to be your manager." So, like, I would, call, I would chase down the invoices, "Hey, like, how could you have him do this work? And, you haven't paid him," and all these things, and, like, it'd been like that for a month, and it's like, you finish the call, you're like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 okay, thank you, thank
Yeah.
you."
Yeah.
And so at the time, like I transitioned from being Úrú Music Collective to just Úrú Collective. And I didn't done that intentionally because I was really missing that space of working with, different types of professionals and creatives because I'd gone from doing like meeting planning, event planning to being in like Lagos. And so I missed working with, the speakers, professors, et cetera, that I had, booked for some of the programs I had done. And so I was like, okay, the problem I had as an event planner was, or basically a conference producer was finding and being able to maintain contact, or even make contact initially with experts from Africa and the Middle East. Of course, you have like more of your I guess globally known and connected I guess like experts and talents. Like it wasn't hard to find Chimamanda, right? Like there were,
Okay.
you reach out to the publisher, this and this and this. So they were structured around that. But finding someone like a Joey or others that I had, worked with or managed at the time, it was kind of hard. And I felt like that challenge, made it harder for them to like go global. So whether that was the speaking engagements or whether it was, um, some brand collaborations or partnerships or consultations. And so that's where my mind was at the time. So it was a natural transition for Joey and I from being friends to then to then me like managing him. And so by the time like I had stepped into like his world and what he was doing, it was like essentially an overhaul of like what he had going on. Obviously, he was successful, accomplished, and everything, but there was not really a structure around him. Like someone who could negotiate, someone who would say, actually, no, this is a liability to what you're building. And then stepping into the podcast specifically, looking around and saying, okay, you're self funding this. How do we get some brands into this because there's reach there, so there's viability, right? And so yeah, so that's essentially how it started, and since then we've just grown from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm interested, so after you found out more about who he was, did you ever
Mhm.
feel pressure about being his manager or not really?
So the thing about working in this, so initially I felt like this was a weakness, and the weakness was I was concerned that because I didn't know as many people here, or that the gravity of who a person is, or was like that, okay, that's a bit of like a weak point. But I've come to find that coming in as an outsider, you don't have the same expectations for yourself as someone who's been around the industry for a while. For me, I'm coming in and I'm like, you owe him the money, so just give him the money. And
Yeah.
whereas somebody else,
Period, yeah.
if somebody else is like, oh, like, oh, this is XYZ brand. Can you please like, and for me, it's like it's the principle, right? So I'm coming. So initially, like I felt pressured to be a bit more palatable in the sense of like get with the program of like what people understand this person or this brand, to be. Um, and over time, and I won't even say like, oh, like I quickly like realized it, but it wasn't until like a few months ago even that I was like, I just had to accept that the weight of someone or brand or company, etc., does not mean the same for me as the next person here, right? And I can either hold on to this as, my like weak point and like be sad about it, or just leverage it, right? And I've chosen to leverage it, which has helped me be a better advocate, or just an advocate, because that's essentially what you are as a manager, is you're essentially advocating for the talent that you're working with. And so I've just accepted that, my reputation, or the way that I do things, is I will ask the hard questions. I will hold you accountable. I will ask us to set standards together, and we will sign contracts, like, and it's okay. And to me, and initially I was like very frustrated by this, because um I, I was frustrated because it felt like for a long time that I was being perceived as difficult.
Mm.
And for now, or not even for now, but now I'm like, okay, well, that's just how I do work, right? As long as it doesn't hurt someone, or it's not disrespectful to a person's, to a person, then I think it's fine. But I would say the thing I've had to learn, like, in this market, is that you're essentially your own government, right? And so you have to govern yourself by your own rules, and your own morals. My morals align with the fact that I choose to not intentionally do wrong by a person. I choose to say, to keep things clear out in the open and transparent. And that's really all that can guide me. Pressure in terms of like managing Joey, I don't feel the pressure, because I trust in who he is as a creative, as a professional. And if I didn't, then I just wouldn't work with him.
Yeah. And it seems that, in this period of time, you guys have really built that rapport and just that genuine connection because it was always genuine from the start. So that's how it's going to go on. And Afrobeats Intelligence, it's become a home for thought-provoking conversations with African musicians and creatives, such as whether it's Ira Star, Mr.
Mhm.
Easy, Tiwa Savage, and more. So, what has the experience of being on the production team taught you? And are there any episodes that have like stuck out to you the most?
Mm. I would say it's really taught me patience. I would say I'm a pretty patient person. Actually, I want to walk that back. I would say that it has taught me how to sit in discomfort.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, sometimes, like, the stress of booking the guests, making the negotiation, etc., it feels like a never-ending cycle. Or it feels like you have this big thing on the table, and you're about to falter it completely. The world's gonna end tomorrow, and you've messed up, basically. There's no turning back. Um, and through this uh latest season, like, it's really taught me that, okay, things that are mistakes, or just current or temporary discomforts, don't define the entirety of the season, or the entirety of, like, the production, right? And at the same time, because, in this past season, we had to learn how to work across, like, time zones. Number one, OkayAfrica is based in New York. So we had to learn how to work across time zones, and essentially, like, since we're ahead here, getting things over to them, and vice versa. Like, you have to kind of think days ahead, because my afternoon is, their morning, right? And so there was it at the time, it felt like it felt like I'm behind, or they're behind, and all these things. And it's literally time and space, like, that separates us, right? So it was figuring out how to be an efficient partner in this. Because of course, like, Joey's the host, like, the talent, and behind the scenes, it was rallying the local production, like our production crew on ground, because we don't shoot in New York, of course. We shoot here in
Mhm.
Lagos, and we actually shoot in my living room.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
ask about that. I'm like, it looks so good the way you guys put it together. I would have never thought, honestly.
yeah. So we actually shoot in my living room, and so it was it was a lot of newness. And in the middle of the newness, you're like, "Ugh," like, because you're remembering how the show ran beforehand, right? You're like, we used to just do this and this. So there was a lot of like patience in, sitting in the discomfort and shedding a old reality and accepting the current reality. Not that it was like, the partnership came in and it was terrible. Not at all. It was, okay, we have a new way of doing things in order to keep this thing, growing in a global fashion. And so, um, at least on the personal level, like and professional level, that's what it taught me. And then in terms of guests, man, there were so many great conversations like this season. The most popular one was definitely Donna One,
Mhm.
at least like across socials. Tiwa Savage was a wonderful conversation, but I think the conversation that sort of how would I say, like, surprised me the most was Bella Shmurda.
Mm.
Bella Shmurda, went in and he's talking about numerology, he's talking about spirituality. And it was surprising for me because, um, you kind of have like this bias in your head about street artists and like, how they, do the music and like the themes that they're talking about, right? But to see Bella Shmurda, like in 2025, label boss at this point, and now seeding Fallout into the market and talking about his relationship with Fallout and his own journey, like spiritually and as an artist, like it just it kind of I don't know, it pushed my heart in a way of like just kind of seeing him in a different light. And I think Joey did a great job of that this season of seeing multiple of our greats in a different life or different lights rather. The Timaya interview, like the funny story about Timaya is he was actually friends with my cousin growing up. And so there's a period where as a kid, I think it was like 5 or 6, where I was in the US, or sorry, in Nigeria. And Timaya actually used to take my siblings and I to get ice cream.
Oh my gosh, wow. That's a
So,
story there.
so, and so, before the interview, even because a lot of the times, like we, build a relationship with the artist. Joey's known him as well for some years or years prior. And so in January, when we followed him to his home state of Bielsa, I told him the story and like I reconnected him with my cousin and, we were all like laughing and joking. And then, then it was months later and time to record the interview. And it was just kind of like seeing him, in a different light where he was telling the story of, essentially how he came up as an artist, as a professional, as a businessman as well. And it was just really beautiful to like sit through, like, with sitting there and watching production and watching the conversation and then, seeing the reception online and, across the world. So I would say those two conversations for me like really hit home. I still, sort of go back to Bella's like episode and just marvel at just the level of heart he has for what he's doing and how he thinks about the people around him.
Yeah, and I like you were talking about how the podcast, it shows talent in a different light. I just love how it's a space for people to feel comfortable, to be vulnerable. You
Hmm.
just can tell they're at peace to speak about their different stories and just things that have gone on in their life and where they are currently. So that's what I've loved most about the podcast, just the authenticity about it, honestly. And
Thank you. Thank you.
of course. And then I know when we initially spoke, you mentioned about how people have gotten lost into the whole Africa to the world. And I know that's something that Joey talks a lot about on his podcast. So, can you share with me more about your own perspective of that?
So for me, coming in, because I came or arrived in Nigeria like 2023, early 2023. And also remembering even before coming to like Lagos, like growing up, for me, because I grew up, I don't want to say peculiar, but unique to like my friends. Like in our household, it was always cool to be African. Like my mom was always speaking the language, like speaking Igbo rather. And we went to this Igbo, church in Atlanta. And so she, whenever we would have family come from Nigeria, they would bring like CDs and everything. And, um, you know, and share, the music. That was the way that my siblings and I sort of connected with the pop culture scene, at least on ground. And so, we saw like our Debanj and the rest of them, eventually Debanj, signing with good music. And of course, that didn't necessarily like pan out, but for years now, like I've kind of seen the industry itself like grow, or at least the commercial market grow. Fast forward to like a 2016 time, when you're seeing like a Wande Cole and the rest of them, like just continuing their career, and you're seeing even your friends start to listen to it, listen to Afrobeats rather. And what really like solidified it for me, I think this was like in 2020, 2021, like I'm, taking a walk in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I see a pickup truck drive past me playing Essence by Thames and Wizkid.
Yeah.
And, like, and it's not like it's a pickup. Like, it's like, they've got, like, in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So, like, for me, it's a proud moment, but it also was like, it just, this market is growing, like the levels like it's reaching. But I just distinctly remember that moment. Now, a lot of the or most of, or I think all of the major labels are in Nigeria, right? Whether physically or whether they have like a conduit or, whatever it may be, they're on ground here. And, you're seeing people who previously would have, maybe been like an industry friend or industry guy, not necessarily like a formalized title, like having formal titles. And so all of that is great. Like it's created the structure that Afrobeats like needs, or the industry on ground like needed, right? And at the same time, we're in a peculiar, and I use peculiar as like a more touche word to say that we don't have local structures that um are local, that are domestic. Meaning, if the US poof disappears tomorrow, what happens to our artists, right? What happens to their ability to tour? What happens to their ability to stream? What happens to their ability to commercialize like their music? So you think about that, and then you also think about, okay, for the artist who's on ground, you've not reached, UK, US market, how are you feeding on a day to day, right? There's music all around us, right? And the question is how are we getting that music? Meaning all these streaming platforms, are our people actually seeding into those streaming platforms? We've had, different interview or heard in different interviews how much a stream is worth like in Nigeria, how much a million streams is worth in Nigeria. We had Burna Boy complaining about it, I think earlier this year. Donna Juan came on Afrobeats Intelligence, and he spoke about how I believe it's like 1 million streams is in Nigeria, or from Nigeria, is worth like $300 on Spotify.
Mhm.
So my concern, we've, in my opinion, we've done Afrobeats to the world, meaning we've hit markets, we've had hits. Um, the concern now is what is at home? What infrastructure do we have at home that allows our artists and our creatives and our businesses to thrive without such heavy global influence or interference. And there's not really an answer to that, right? Or the answer is we don't really have it. So while I like appreciate and totally say like Afrobeats to the world has like served us, like we've earned money, our artists are able to more than take care of themselves. But my concern is what happens once the applause is kind of done. And it won't come to like a screeching halt, but we're kind of seeing we're in a valley this year. You can think about how many albums have dropped this year, EPs, singles, and how many of them have stuck, right? Music Friday every new Music Friday, we get a crate of songs, we get a crate of EPs, albums, and how many of them stuck? We had who dropped this year? We had Joe Boy drop an album, and in my opinion, that was probably the best one that I've seen or heard this year. We also had who else?
Ruger.
We also Ruger dropped an album. We had Maya Kun drop an album. Benson dropped an album. And so you're kind of seeing, our artists fulfilling their end of their contracts, right? In terms of delivering an album to, more than likely this international label, but it's not really sticking the same way that it has previously. And then we've also kind of let go of certain elements that were distinctly Afrobeats in exchange for making it Afro R&B or this. And that diversity is fine, but it's like when you do it for the gaze of like an international audience, it gets a little dicey. We have like it's always a debate on this, but our big three, like our whiz kid, saying, I'm not an Afrobeats artist, and so it's. I just feel like we're in a bit of a not even a bit of we're in a commercial valley um in terms of like our dollars or our naira, and then we're also in a bit of a cultural identity crisis because we've adopted so much in terms of our sound that we almost don't even recognize our own sound.
No, you're hitting on so many points. Because even in my first episode I had titled it, I was like, "Oh, is Afrobeat slowing down?" But to your point,
Mhm.
it's not as it slowing down, it's more so, like you said, things aren't sticking. Um, and about the whole trying to feed in so many genres into the sound now as well, and how that's kind of diluting it in a sense, and that's why I love people like Rema. He doesn't care.
Mm,
He's gonna do what he wants to do.
yeah.
Yeah. And that actually, that's a great segue into talking more about, music infrastructure within Nigeria, because me and you, we've talked about this already, but last year how he had his homecoming concert in Benin, and on the front end, sold out, great success, but on the back end, just how much actually went into that being able to happen. I know that in his Rolling Stone article or Rolling Stone interview, he talked
Yeah.
about how he had to fly in people and
Hmm.
getting equipment, spending so much money. So
Yeah.
my question to you, as someone who is live and direct and on ground in Lagos, like what is your take on how there can be change for more Nigerian artists to be able to put on high quality shows at home?
Uh, it's really hard because it's like I can say that, okay, you need to have like the right talent in the agencies and the production companies, right? But, like Rema said, you can fly in a production team, even for an event that happens every December. I don't necessarily want to share because I don't know if they're, how they feel, but they have to fly in a production crew from South Africa. Like imagine, you are trying to put on, something that's for the culture, right? And you have to find resources outside. You have to externalize like your resources in order to make it possible. So so when I the question is a bit twofold for me because it's like it boils down to government. Everything in this country, in this industry, boils down to government. As in, there's no like when you're lacking infrastructure on a basic level, like what was it? Um, what was it? There's about 16 million people in this country who have absolutely no access to electricity. Begin to talk about the people. This is a country of 230 million, right? So begin to talk about the next majority. And the next majority barely has access to about, I think they said 6 to 12 hours of electricity, right? So we're talking about we're first fighting very basic needs, right? Then you begin to think about education. We have quite a number of universities here, but the question is also, what are they teaching young talent, right? I was on a panel, I think it was a couple months ago, or maybe even last year, and there was an executive from a well-known like label here, and she was saying that like they have a talent problem. Meaning, like, not necessarily, like, on the music side, like, talent is plenty in terms of music, in terms of like, it's plenty here. It's the issue is not, um, supply, right? But talent on the business and, like, basically on the business side of, like, the label, are we actively training people who can work within these companies, work efficiently, not just work according to like what was prescribed to you, but work in a way that is forward thinking and allows not just the artist, but the label entirely to grow, in a manner that competes with the global standards. And the answer for her, and from what I've seen, was no. And it's a really, really hard reality. And I feel like very like how would I say? I feel like very like woo woo for like for like even voicing this, but even in the small productions like that I do, like it's hard to actually find people who are locally who are working with a standard that competes globally. Like it feels like a very very like sad thing to say, and I'm kind of like mourning this reality that we do have a culture of a bit of mediocrity. And it really hurts to say that, like, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest, like, we have, like, at least, like, on ground of, like, just anyhowness, like, somebody will give you something and they'll say, like, but isn't that what you asked for? I'm like, yes, but, like,
Can
it's
we
missing
improve a little
these,
bit?
yeah,
Yeah.
like, it's missing these, like, things, but, it serves the function. And I feel like that's what's gotten us here, whether it's music, whether it's film, whether it's government infrastructure, whether it's our roads, our water systems of like it serves the purpose, right? We don't have a culture of thrive and excellence because everyone is fighting for their basic needs, right? And that affects things from top to bottom.
Yeah, that's absolutely true because if you're fighting for basic needs, when you're hearing critique, you're not gonna wanna hear that. Like you said, they're just like, "Well, there you have it," you know?
Yeah.
So it's it's definitely a really tough spot to be in,
Mhm.
and but like you said, there's endless talent. I'm just really hoping for better infrastructure in the near future for, just just more
Mhm.
opportunities for people to do what they love to do,
Mhm.
and to thrive in their purpose. It's just really
Yeah.
disheartening that they don't have the backing to be able to do that.
I will say that this current administration with our Minister of Arts, Tourism, and Cultural Economy, Honorable Hanatu, her office is new, right? Like I think it's the not even I think it's the most collaborative we've seen the government in terms of like our cultural economy, the arts, music, the rest of that. And to have a minister who's like, fully dedicated to that part of our economy does in fact matter. And so I will give the government credit in that capacity that, at least for music, culture, and arts, like if there was ever a time for you to advocate and take advantage from, a wholesome standpoint, but take advantage of what we have on ground right now. Now would be the time to sort of collaborate with our reps to, build some infrastructure into music. So whether that's copyright, IP laws, the rest of them, this is sort of like the time in most recent history.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly for you, I want to talk about Úrú Collective. I couldn't not talk about that with you. So what sparked you founding Úrú Collective, and can you share about its mission?
So for Úrú Collective, like I was saying before, it was born out of missing that piece of cultural programming, meaning connecting people to or connecting brands, event series to people who could really bring great insights to the conversation, to the story. We have people like Joey Akan, of course, who's in music, but we also have Mimi Chaka, who is an actress, and she's really just built a career of really being a class act in any of the roles that she's doing. And so it's just been really interesting to kind of see how she's filled herself within the industry, and then also, um, yeah, and through that, with all of the talent that we're working with, the main focus is ecosystem. The focus is making sure that not only is their work promoted and protected, but also, like we were saying before, infrastructure bleeds into everything here, right? So making sure that they have protections around the work that they're doing, and that the resources that they need to, do this brand campaign, do this podcast are readily available. And so, essentially, Uru Collective, like, yes, we do talent management, we do personal branding, but at the and speaker management, but at the heart of it, we're building ecosystems around some of our greatest minds, both in Africa and the Middle East. There's a partnership that I can't share too much just yet, coming in the Middle East, but my goal from the beginning, whether it was starting as Uru Music Collective down to now being Uru Collective, has always been that cultural bridge between Africa and the Middle East to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. And I'm excited for you of how things will continue to grow. And yeah, I just know this is only the beginning for you because it's such a great idea, honestly. And just to help fill that void that's there. And thank you so much, Nneka, for coming on my podcast. It's really
Of
been such an
course.
insightful conversation, honestly. So thank you so much again.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me. I truly wish you success in this. Like, it's a great you asked amazing questions, and so, I hope to see more people on.
Yes, amen. Amen. Thank you so much. All right. Bye.
Alright, take care.